Hello and welcome back to The Motivating Force. Joining me today we have Josue, an aspiring Marine Corps officer who's currently finishing up ROTC and his bachelor's in criminal justice. And myself, Justin, a motivational speaker who's always more than excited to share wonderful ideas and topics with you guys. Today, we have kind of a more philosophical conversation. We're going to be talking about how to know when you're making the right decision. And of course, if you're coming here to this video seeking this information, you kind of know why you're here, but I do want to go over a quick point on why we're talking about it, because it ties the whole conversation together. It shows you where we're coming from. What I put down is we don't know how many wrong decisions we make in life, and not all of our decisions directly impact us. And most people want to do the most good in the world. And when we can confirm our decisions, it acts as a great confidence booster for us to be able to do more. It also allows us to be more effective with lacking hesitation. And it allows us to stand our ground. Something we need today. So let's get into that.
And as you mentioned earlier, that people that are watching this are most likely here for a reason. They know why they're here. By the time you start thinking about the decisions and life choices that you're making, it's usually too late, right? Those wrong decisions have already been made, and those thoughts are usually brought up from like guilt or shame or like just depression that you start looking back on things. But this episode is really focused on helping you to change your mentality, so then we start making these decisions and really important paths in life proactively instead of reactively. Instead of focusing on what we've done wrong in the past and trying to fix that, just moving on and focusing that what's starting from here on out is just going to be as good decision-making processes as possible.
Good to clear the table, have a fresh slate, good peace of mind going into this. So very non-discriminate, non-judgmental towards everybody here. We're all here for a reason. Let's get into that. We see there are going to be two distinct forms of trying to make the right decision. The first one, we have an intrinsic and an extrinsic form of decision making.
That's inward and outward. For the people that don't know that.
The fancy way of saying it, yeah. So there's a lot of feel-good information out there for intrinsic decision making. And it gets pretty generic over time, but we are going to cover the basics. It's pretty simple. Making that right decision intrinsically, it's going to suck. But if you listen to your inner voice, you'll know the decisions you're making are right or wrong, which is why we don't focus on this too much.
I mean, I know that you're not really going to go into intrinsic a lot, but I will be touching up on points about like ego, because ego does play a big role on this, if it's intrinsic or extrinsic. I'll touch on that later for everybody.
So as we said, we're not going to focus too much on that intrinsic stuff, but you're going to see it sprinkled around. The same principles are going to apply. We figured it'd be more of an interesting conversation to talk about that extrinsic effect you're going to have when you're trying to make decisions and trying to help people or just do the right thing. Extrinsic decision making relies on two key principles. The first principle is we are essentially talking about leadership. A couple different forms of it, but it's all there. Someone is relying on you to do something, or you realize a change needs to be made and you're rising up to the challenge. It's the first principle to this. The second principle is also riding off of that idea of leadership. It's going to cover some philosophy spread by the great and mighty Jocko. We're going to dive into some concepts of extreme ownership and detachment and kind of wrap it all up into being a little understanding of the entire environment.
Yeah, and going off the point of leadership, if you're somebody that's like, oh, I'm not a boss, I'm not in management, but you're like a father or a mother, or you're an older sibling, this does apply to you. You can use this in all aspects. Don't think that leadership, when we're talking about it, is only in like workplace scenarios where you're like a boss or something. You can apply this if you have people that look up to you in general, because this can affect them as much as it affects you.
It's a great point to bring up, because we're seeing how, and it's exactly that, people kind of have that mentality where like, oh, well, I don't have any official responsibilities towards anything, so none of that matters to me. Yes, it does. even just being even a low wage employee, bottom of the totem pole, you have coworkers that are on your level, and some of those people, they are going to look up to you, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's in the workplace. And personally, you're going to have friends who, it's kind of more of a mutual thing with friends, which is why it seems a little more tricky, but they do look up to you.
Yeah, you influence each other. It's that social norm that you guys have together. And then if you start doing something, they might start looking more into that. And then next thing you know, you're both going down this dark path, when if you would have just made the right decision at the beginning, you guys would both be good.
So when you enter into that mentality that we're all leaders, you can really start understanding what we're saying and apply this and start making the right decisions. Of course, the whole reason we're here, how do we make these right decisions? And the first step, as I've mentioned, talking about Jocko Willink, we're going to be talking about extreme ownership. And of course, for any additional information on this whatsoever, Jocko Willink has a book that he's written about this.
He has lectures, he has videos, hundreds of them.
Everything. I mean, there's free information out there. There's paid information out there, like his book, that we definitely implore you guys to go get if this is a topic that really interests you guys. And if anything, just head over to Jocko Podcast and check that out. Any episode on there is going to help you with this. He talks about it all the time. The idea behind extreme ownership is that everything is your fault. Somehow, some way. It's all on you. And the reason we take it to this extreme level is because our ego makes it really hard to think like this. So how do we make that a little easier to kind of comprehend? It's the same methodology that's used when we talk about, well, everything has a consequence. But that's because people always put a negative connotation on that. But consequences have a positive reaction to them sometimes.
Yeah.
And they also have negative consequences, and that's the ones that we typically associate with that word.
Yeah, it's like people associate karma, but there's also good karma. You think of karma being this bad thing, that you do something bad and then you're going to get hit. Like karma's going to come around and smack you in the face, put you in line. But there's also good karma. It's the same train of thought.
That's the point we're hitting here. And when you start understanding that these words actually do have that positivity to them, it becomes a little easier to take ownership of everything. Because when good things happen around you, you can take pride knowing that you had a part in that. And I think a really easy example, we kind of talked about this before getting into the show today, was if your coworker shows up late, but they're just your coworker, you have no leadership, roles or responsibilities, how is that your fault? And I'm telling you that it is your fault. And here's some ways you can think about that to kind of help role play this along a little bit. If your coworker's late all the time, you could kind of say, well, maybe I could be a little more enthusiastic, a little more empathetic towards them too. Kind of, hey man, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? Maybe you're not enforcing like the workplace culture enough, really helping get your coworkers involved in things. And maybe you don't care at all about any of that. And if you don't, maybe, well, hey, there's part of the problem, right?
Yeah, it's a big problem right there, which we've talked about, being satisfied in the workplace with that work environment. If you don't have the PMA to begin with, how is anybody else going to enjoy their time there? And a good point that you made of being positive about the work culture is also trying to get you to avoid getting angry or jealous about them coming in late. Like, don't go and be cynical about how you're always on time, but then they're never on time. They're always late. Don't do that. We're trying to get you to make the right choices, which is to be reinforce positive behavior. Get them to want to come to work on time. Get them to want to interact with you before work if that's going to help make everybody there on time. Get that workplace environment a little bit more of a healthy place to be.
And these are just some easy examples to kind of help you guys get the overall picture here. And the underlying factor here, the real drive home for learning how to make right decisions, is start making smaller decisions. When we put ourselves in the mindset of extreme ownership, what we're really doing is kind of putting a microscope on every single action that happens around us and seeing how we influence that. And the way that applies to this is take smaller steps towards decisions. If you're trying to make these big jumps into these some harder, more complex decisions, you kind of just land where you land.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're shuffling along, you'll kind of feel when that ground gets a little shaky, and you can learn to, maybe it's forgiving enough that you can take that little step back, or you can start shifting to the right or to the left a bit, find that solid ground.
Yeah, you get more of a balance when you're doing it that way, instead of taking these giant leaps that are theoretically leaps of faith, because you don't really know if it's the right choice or the right path that you're going to end up on.
Yeah, there's always going to be a way where you can take these smaller steps and get a feel for it. And sometimes you can take small steps all the way to the finish line, or it can be enough to where, you can take 2 or 3 small steps and really get a good gauge for where you need to go and then make that jump. But either way, just taking these little small actions will help you understand the reactions of that and move you closer towards that direction you need to go into.
Yeah, that's a very good point on being proactive when making these choices and looking into what your life can hold for you. But another point that I wanted to talk about when it comes to extreme ownership is forgiveness, right? This is where I'm going to touch on a little bit of that ego side, that intrinsic side. Like, you're holding yourself back regardless of the scenario if you're holding on to these grudges or these malintentions that you have towards people that have done you wrong, or even if you just think that they've done you wrong. They've done something bad, and you're going to constantly bring that up every time you think of them. You're not going to grow as a person. You're not going to grow in that path. You're not going to be taking those little steps forward. You're just going to be stuck standing there. The way you can make those proactive small choices and small steps forward is to learn to forgive throughout yourself first. Forgive them for whatever it is that they did. Take ownership of that situation and say, I'm now the bigger person. I've made the decision to forgive and move on accordingly. And that should help boost you in the right path that you need to head in, instead of being locked in place in that, in like those grudges or those just terrible thoughts that you've had.
Yeah, I think freeing yourself up from that negative energy is going to have a big impact on making the right decision, in that same way that taking little steps will help boost your confidence. Because, there's a lot to say about PMA, or that positive mental attitude. And you're going to really kind of start to manifest around you the things you want around you. It's true to say that when we think of like being negative all the time, you're going to attract that negativity. Things are going to prove you right all the time. So when you take these small little strategic approaches towards some of these decisions, and you boost your confidence, and you start, whether it's like you said, the act of forgiveness, just being more understanding, and just really clearing your mind towards having a more innocent, positive approach,
right?
The confidence behind it, you're going to get that type of result.
And like we're saying, the whole forgiveness aspect, or just being understanding, is a huge play on ego, because it is going to be tough putting like your ego to the curb and trying to check yourself, making sure you're not putting out those negative vibes or whatever it is out there in the world, because at the end of the day, you don't want to attract that negativity if you're trying to live a structured life. Taking a step away from being understanding and all that stuff, we're going to take another approach, which as well I was heavily influenced by Jocko, and I've mentioned this before about the detaching yourself from the situation example that he's given in the book. And this wasn't in Extreme Ownership. This was in Leadership Strategy and Tactics that he put out. Such a great book. But he talks a lot about his experiences going through Navy SEAL training, and from the different officers he had to becoming an officer himself, and the different strategies and tactics that he went through. And a big thing that happened was when they were doing a live fire drill, there was a scenario where he realized all it took was him having to detach himself from the situation, like taking himself back. Everybody's so focused in on this one area, and I relate it to, like, if you're focusing in on whatever it is you're doing in life, you're trying to achieve this end goal of like a business or this degree or whatever it takes, and everything's just going wrong. It feels like you're not making right decisions. Detaching yourself from the situation is like taking those horse blinders off. You're going from focusing in with those blinders, you're only seeing that one area. All you got to do is take them off, take the step back, take a breather, be grounded, and you're going to be able to really analyze the full spectrum of what's ahead, what other options are there to help you and assist you when you really need them.
You know, there's the old cliche is always that, you know, it's easier to help other people than it is to help yourself, right? You can always give great advice, but you can never take your own advice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what detachment allows you to do when you start practicing it. The kind of idea that just really came up was, like, if you're trying to go between what career path you're going to make, same thing, right? You take small steps, head in one direction, and if you feel like something was interesting to you, take a class here and there on that and see if that pulls you that way. Or if you kind of like, we're fine where we're going. But to be able to detach, you can kind of envision that future and put it in somebody else's shoes, right? Don't think about yourself as the lawyer. Picture what a lawyer does on their free time, what they do when they get home. Kind of imagine what a lawyer does like that, and then imagine what maybe a doctor does on their free time and kind of see what looks more interesting to you. Don't put yourself in those shoes of being like, well, if I'm a lawyer, I'm going to, you know, we're going to think like this, but if I was a doctor, well, maybe I'd have more time to help people. You know, don't focus on that. Focus on it being somebody else, because then you can really kind of have this non-judgment on it.
Yeah, you don't have a bias. Exactly the word. And it's funny because I use this example a lot. Like I said, I love it. It's like it hits one of my heartstrings when I hear detaching yourself from the situation. But I use it a lot recently because my little brother's been here. He lives up in Georgia, but this past, the quarantine, working or going to school via computer, he's able to stay with us a little bit longer. So then I've kind of been able to give him some pointers as the older brother and stuff, and detaching yourself from a situation, whether it be in school or with friends or on TikTok, it helps. It goes a long way. While I was taking the step back and detaching myself, I realized that I can implement this as well, because in hindsight, I'm trying to help him. And that goes into play with this, because when you're detaching yourself, you can even see that there's you're affecting other people with those actions you're taking and these decisions you're choosing. As that example I just gave, I'm helping my little brother out and based on decisions I'm taking. So hopefully I'm taking the right ones and helping him grow at a younger age. Whereas when I was in his age, I was kind of going dark, hanging out with the wrong crowds, and I'm trying to be proactive. And so then he doesn't make those same decisions, But sometimes when I'm not saying you're a sibling or whatever, but if you're an employee, you have coworkers, realizing that your actions also affect others goes a long way, because sometimes it only takes a little act of sacrifice on your end for them to benefit. And I'm not saying throw yourself under a bus for somebody, but maybe you need to give a little bit of energy towards them, and then it helps boost them up. Like we were saying about the coworker that was coming in late. Maybe it takes you just putting a little bit more effort into that job, sacrificing a little bit more effort instead of on what you're doing. Focus that into the coworker, and helping build that environment that they want to be at will help benefit them. Get that morale up, get them to come to work on time.
Yeah, and I mean that helps you too, because hey, if they start coming to work on time, that means you get your work done. They get their work done, and you both can leave and not have to deal with the consequences of them being 30 minutes behind everybody else. So overall, it helps everybody just to take that step back. And that's the importance of it. And I did make some notes real quick on how to practice detachment for people where this is a new concept. And coming into it, step one for detaching, and a real easy way to do it, is write down the scenario. Not just the problem, but write down the whole picture. And even if it takes you, it doesn't matter how long it takes to do it, write it down, set it aside. Come back to it the next day. Don't add anything, but just read over it.
See what you're missing.
See what you're missing.
Yeah.
Look at that picture. That scenario that you wrote down, I mean, that's that picture in words. If you have the time, of course, to make this decision over a longer period of time, you can just sit there and go back to it every day, and then take a different piece of paper, different note entirely, and write down what you were missing. And then kind of read the scenario and then read what was missing from it and compare.
Yeah.
Take that fresh approach every single day on it. And I mean, soon enough, that what's on that paper, that doesn't even involve you at all.
And that's pretty similar to what I had to do when coming up with the decision to shift my schedule around, going to the nights and having, not being home with my lady on certain days, but then I am getting like what are the pros and cons, really taking a step back. But this is, of course, I have the time, or had the time, to make that decision, because it is a big decision. So it is that leap. But you don't just take the leap blindly. I had to sit down with my girl. I had to talk about it. It's a life change. I really have to analyze little things, if it's going to be beneficial, if it's not. What am I losing? What am I gaining? And really taking that step of detachment to guarantee that I'm making a right decision.
See, I like that. I like that a lot, because you're coming in with the pros and cons approach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of put down was viewing a short-term outcome and a long-term outcome.
Correct.
Of the decision. Is that kind of something that you did when you were kind of, I mean, because you're flipping your schedule completely upside down.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to nights from being a daytime worker, and that takes a lot to do.
It takes a lot, yeah. But it's looking at the long-term as well, because not only is it just a shift change, it's also financial change. I'm going to get a promotion with this as well. I know we've talked about me being a lab 2. Shift change is also bringing in a promotion to lab 3, which is almost like a supervisor at that point. He was saying in that shift, I will be the highest ranked employee, I guess. Not like an ego shot or anything, humble brag. But with that financial difference, you start planning ahead. Like, what debts do I have that I can get rid of because of this? Or what can we get because of this? So instead of being in a 1-bedroom apartment, I can maybe get a 2-bedroom, or I can start looking into renting houses, because now I'm going to have that cushion helping me out with the down payment or whatever it is. So taking those long-term benefits or losses into effect was very important in that decision-making process.
It's great too, because at the same time, like I said, as you're going through all this, when you look at those short terms and the long terms, what you're going to start seeing, like what Josue's seeing now with making this decision about his job change, is it branches the window more. Mm-hmm. So like originally when you think about it, you're just going to think, oh man, well, this is going to suck. I'm going to have to change my sleep schedule around. But you start looking at the long term, you're like, well, okay, but this also comes with the promotion. Okay, well, this also comes with the pay increase. Oh, okay, now we're talking, now we're diving down these different paths, these different roads here, and are more of them positive or are more of them negative? Because that'll help you make that decision.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just going to bring up right now, is not to just act on impulse, because all of this is bringing on benefits. I can pick out all the good things, but then don't let that distract you, because you also have to focus on the bad. As much as you don't want to focus on the bad things, you have to look at the losses as well. Like I'm losing 3 nights with my girl, but then there's other things. It's really a balance. I'm sure there's others that I just kind of don't want to talk about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but that idea of not just acting on impulse, but what I kept telling her is that since the good does outweigh the bad, I just keep bringing it up. So then it's like, this is the motivation to keep me positive about the shift change. Instead of, even if it's more positive by like 2 or 3 things, instead of getting distracted and being like, but then there's a lot that I'm losing, and then I'm going to be like struggling to sleep in the mornings. Just keep bringing up the good things, what you are going to benefit from the situation, because then it's going to push you through taking that course of action positively.
Well, it's great, and I'm glad that you're able to go through all this and we're able to kind of give that example here on the show. But let's kind of tie all this together, packaged up nice and pretty for everybody here. How to know you are making the right decisions. The first step you want to do is take ownership of everything around you, because if you own it, then you have the ability to change something about it. It's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. And when you do that, you sprinkle on that understanding, that forgiveness. You're able to be that fair judge of it all. And then you're able to detach from those situations, those scenarios, give you that unbiased approach coming into it, knowing you can change everything, and coming in there with an innocent, pure, positive attitude. You're going to make the right decision every time.
All of those things are great, man. And being able to just put your ego under control sometimes is very important when it comes to personal growth as human beings. You know, we're social creatures and we need to be able to put ourselves in check from time to time to make sure we are making right decisions, make sure we are spending time with the right groups of people, and knowing that our actions do affect others, even in the little things. So being able to affect them positively will go a long way. And I just think a great way to affect others positively is for the people to, like and share this video, send these to people you care about, even if it's somebody that needs a pick-me-up in their workplace or needs to learn to shift their attitude in the workplace, send this video to them. Maybe this can help them out and you guys can have a positive work environment. It'll be fantastic. We would very much appreciate this. You all know that we appreciate and love every single one of you that do stick around with us. It means a lot.
And intrinsically, to help make that right decision and build that structure you need, you can always go over to our social medias. We're over on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Parler. All those links are down below. And not only just to get in on the community involvement side for growing yourself, but it's a direct link to us. You'll be able to message us there whenever you want. We're more than happy to answer any questions or talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. So feel free, take advantage of that. We're here for you guys.
And again, we are here for you guys every Monday and Wednesday. We're trying to get back on schedule with our Sunday videos. Stick around. We are making a lot of reels. Our social medias are going to be popping. They're going to be booming. Share those with friends and family.
And before you guys tune into Wednesday's video, I do have a question for everybody. Since we talked about forgiveness quite a bit this episode, I wanted to ask a question about a good old cliche that we have. Do you guys think it's better to forgive and to forget? Or is it better to forgive and remember?
Now until Wednesday, you guys go and get.